it's easier to sell to someone you already have a relationship with. It's easier to sell it to your network.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
Glad to have you back. This is part 2 of our water cooler about better engagement of cold email, future of cold email, and hyper-personalization, just to name a few. Enjoy. What do you think of other people who actually go ahead and basically subscribe to every mailing list they can find, or not everyone, but a lot of mailing lists, so they can receive a certain number of emails?
I think that's the pyramid link farms of today. I don't think that's that cool because, again, like who's sending that message? It's a MailChimp API. And look, the data science engineers who went to Stanford are like laughing again. They say, well, you don't think we understand this is an automated message that can be triggered by doing nothing and everybody's doing this? Maybe if like there's a brand new inbox that has a ridiculous amount of opt-in emails, maybe they're like, okay, maybe we should take a look at this black hat activity going on. It could be a flag. Like you said, I think the senders, there's a sender reputation. That's kind of obvious. Everybody knows that's a thing.
That's obvious, yeah.
So I think it's like this algorithm is sender reputation times the engagement that it's getting. So if Elon Musk sends me an email, that could be an indication that I'm a good inbox to be sending because I'm friends with Elon. I don't know.
Holy hell, you may actually just point what the future looks like is, like domain authority. Now you're going to have like people authority. Holy hell, that'll be horrible.
And if that's the case, don't freak out, but you're just going to be, seriously, your inbox will become a business asset, just like your LinkedIn profile, just like your page rank on your homepage, just like your Rolodex back in the 1970s. Like it's an asset that you cannot screw up.
And honestly, this is very easy to figure out the domain authority of that email is number of email received or cold email received from the outside to this inbox, most likely.
Wow. Yeah.
Every human being willing to talk to me, like Elon Musk, probably. Bill Gates, who had like so many emails, he couldn't even filter them anymore.
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel like we're closer to understanding how spam filters work now more than I've ever been. Seriously, because, this data's out there. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Because if Bill Gates sends you a message, it's going straight to your inbox. How does Gmail know that Bill Gates is important? Well, that's because he gets...
Or does it?
Yeah. I mean, last time Bill emailed me, it went straight to my inbox, but Anyways,
I flagged him as spam.
No, but I think there's a lot to this. There's like, how long have you had your inbox, Jeremy? How many years?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely, yeah, the number of years definitely help. I mean, I inbox very well. There's no problem with that.
How many emails have you sent from that inbox? Don't you think that matters?
Yeah, more than 200,000, something like that, yeah.
Right, okay. Maybe that's this whole thing, like, all right, let's just say it. Is cold email moving to your work email?
Yes, I think so. I definitely think that's what's happening slowly, but that's also risky. That's your seatbelt. So
it is. But look, like what else is going on in cold email? What else is moving? Personalization going up and volume, I think, is starting to become less and less important. It's also more and more expensive to personalize that many emails, So,
the funny thing, Jack, is in the SEO world, everyone's just talking about like, hey, this new, Google engine, just now I drop like, 6 places, in my keywords or whatever kind of thing, But it's funny that, they say like, hey, this is a Penguin release or hey, this is the XYZ release.
Yeah, that's right.
But maybe there is also the same type of release that goes unnoticed in the email provider space.
Without a doubt.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly what happened actually, in February this year, like where suddenly, lots of people just have like deliverability problems and stuff like that. And I think definitely there was a release at that time. And that was TensorFlow.
Yeah, that's true.
But they may have done already like a few more releases that we don't know about.
Right. And I'm thinking whether or not you use automation, like we mentioned in an earlier cast, that's not so important. The big thing is what kind of sender are you over a long period of time? If you keep that in mind, it's almost scary, but exciting at the same time because spammers are like, they're not having a good day. They're having a bad time out there. But if you're an SDR who's playing more of a long-term game, you have a 2 or 3 part campaign where you just try and get prospects in your network and then you sell to your network. I think that's what's going to be going on. you're selling to your network. And the goal of cold email is maybe to grow your network, or to just, it's still going to be start a conversation, but maybe even one step before that, we're just get on their radar. What do you think of this? Selling to your network and using it to grow your network. That's kind of maybe what's going to happen.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Until now, this was more the marketing realm,
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it's moving to the sales realm. The same way, marketing's been leading the way on a lot of things. And I think now it just gets, it's like your personal kind of brand coming.
That's true.
Now it started with sales automation, and now it's effectively building a list, building your personal list. That always have been there to some extent, but I think it becomes more of a necessity as more and more buyers are going up, that sort of thing. Like,
right. So can we package this water cooler chat in something where, if you're listening,
probably not.
Yeah, probably not. What I don't want you to do is listen to us ramble for 40 minutes and say, huh, now what?
We touched about a lot of things that are potentially going to happen in the future. But right now, I think you guys, if you focus on how can I not just write, a good offer, but something that will resonate with my user or make them perform some kind of action. And like Jack said, I think I really love your idea about, let's start to build first a relationship, and maybe like, if you're thinking long enough, maybe in 3 months' time, you're going to hit them back with maybe more feedback or some sort of, information that moves them further into your sort of like sales cycle or sales understanding.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's not trying to push, a product down the throat of people. It's really understanding, will they actually need my solution? Would that actually be helping them? But most of the time, people are so used to get sold to that, they put the guard up.
Correct.
So the goal is just to get the time of the relationship to grow, nurture.
To open.
And to open. And like we mentioned in a few casts as well, sometimes more direct approach, more salesy approach also works better. So, you still have to balance that, I guess, depending on the product you're trying to sell. But so if you're selling like a $29 a month product, you can't really afford like a 6-month sales cycle. I don't think it makes sense.
And probably cold calling is definitely out. Maybe for those lower ticket items, cold email could be out. I don't know. It depends on your deal size. But yeah, this is something very important to think about. But I think what we're getting at here just has to be laid on the table. It's easier to sell to someone you already have a relationship with. It's easier to sell to your network. For sure, no one in sales is going to argue. No one in marketing is going to argue. Think about anyone who's on your email list or following me on Twitter, in your LinkedIn network. Those are going to be far easier to close than a classic cold prospect, right? Okay, can we break down why without it sounding too obvious? I've got something, and I mention this in consults sometimes, but go ahead, Jeremy.
For me, it always comes down to trust.
Nailed it.
Right?
Yeah, that's the word.
Just as simple as that.
Okay, so there's trust. And I think if anyone's listening to this podcast, and a lot of times I'm doing work for clients that come from the podcast, it works so well because trust is laid out. And there's also an awareness that this person, I trust. It goes a little bit beyond trust. It's like, not only do I believe what they're saying, but I believe they're an expert in this. And that to me is like the best firepower you could have as a salesperson. If your prospects go to you for answers for free, they're going to come to you, because your paid stuff is that much better.
That's a great point. I don't think for me, expert is so much of a requirement, in a sense that it's more like I trust who they are and what they will do and what they will deliver.
I feel like I trust that people who buy QuickMail are happy, are satisfied, are pleased with their decision. I think that's the level of trust that.
Interesting. I would more look into, I trust that if I go with QuickMail, I know who's behind it and I know he'll get my back.
There you go.
He has my back. He's not that shady person trying to make a few bucks out of me.
That's true. Which
honestly, I will hate, if that was the case.
Like, think about it as like a shovel in the gold rush. I mean,
that's right.
It's basically a shovel in the gold rush.
You want a good shovel, not one that breaks,
Yeah. Okay. So they either have to believe in you or your product, right?
And I think being upfront is very important as well, because some people, they come up and they say like, hey, we need, like I mentioned or a few times, like, hey, we need to send like 10,000 emails. Can you guarantee us that we're going to deliver? And I tell them, no, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter, I can't tell you, or tell me how much email I should send per day. I was like, honestly, you can send millions of emails if people engage and wants to receive your email, but only like 10, before you get blocked if people hate your email. So
Yeah,
I can't do a prediction
that's
based
true,
on
yeah.
that. And I think being upfront and honest actually really helps with that in building trust.
Going back to this idea that it's easier to sell to our network.
Yep.
We had a conversation about engagement. Let's really get to the nuts and bolts of what it looks like to use cold email to both build your network and then sell to them. I think we can talk about those 2 points here.
Okay. You mentioned very successfully that just build a white paper, something of value and then get people included into that, be inclusive. And I think that's a very strong and powerful way of using cold email, like inviting people to the podcast when thinking like, hey, you got something interesting. I love your voice. Would you actually be open to come and share that with the world?
Yeah.
I think it's a very powerful proposition.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I know somebody who has a podcast, over 100 episodes like us, and their main purpose of the podcast is to interview prospects, potential clients. That's it.
Mm-hmm. It is a great tactic at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people do that.
And why though? Why is it working? Because it gives this chance to say, okay, oh yeah, Samantha, she's the one who had me on her podcast. She's a pro at XYZ. It was cool. We talked about this. And then next time that you're in the market for whatever she's selling, the trust has been established, right? So I think our brothers and sisters in the SEO world are probably always 5 years ahead of us outbounders. And maybe you can say yes or no to that. But one of the things I used to watch, like the Moz Whiteboard Fridays, I love those videos. I thought they were really cool for like just marketing stuff. And one of the things they said, if you wanted to get a backlink from a webmaster, is engage with their content first, like leave comments on their blog, follow them on Twitter. Sometimes like if it's a really important blog, send them a cake, in the mail and just say like, awesome. And then reach out with your request so that you've built up sort of a back and forth before you do the ask. And that's the same thing, right?
Jack, doesn't the cake become sour when it comes with a backlink request?
Oh, they use the cake person in the same city to give it to him. But thankfully, that would probably backfire. But yeah, so that's a tactic that's, I think, still sound, but they went about that without using cold email, engaging on content that they're building. Like, for example, if some of your prospects have podcasts, listen to a couple episodes and leave a very intelligent review, glowing review of the podcast, and maybe take a screenshot and send it to him. Say, hey, keep up the great work. That's an opener if I've ever heard one. And by the way, if you're listening, you want to talk to me, you want to talk to Jeremy, just do that for us. And
yeah, I was waiting for the plug here. Just leave a review and send us, the proof.
No, but seriously, like if somebody wanted to get a reply from Jeremy, if they said, hey, sick cast, Jeremy, keep it up, with a screenshot of their review, you're going to write back.
Yeah, but I got a better way that you'll definitely get my reply back, like 100%. It's like, hey, Jack, hey, Jeremy, I tried what you said in episode X. Here's the results. Thank you so much. This is what it changed in my life. Or,
Yeah, we'll have you on the show.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily getting on the show, but for me, it proved that you're willing to actually do the effort of, implementing some of the advice that we give.
Yeah.
And that way, if you reach out to me, it's not a tire kicker. It's not a time waster. And my time is precious. Jack's time is precious as well, I think, right?
50% is precious. Crude oil precious.
There you go. So it shows like I'm really investing into this relationship and I actually implement what you guys are recommending. And this is basically what is my question now is like, hey, I've been doing that, got great result. It really changed my stuff, but I'm struggling here. Do you have any advice for me? Of course, I'm going to reply because you invested that time up front into showing me that you're serious. You're not a tire kicker. You take action on advice. You're going to get my reply.
And I think you use this same tactic to get Mark Cuban.
Yes, I actually did do that with Mark Cuban, just implementing his advice, asking him very honest advice, like asking him question like, hey, can you help me, with this because I'm struggling here. He answered me like 1 or 2 words. I implemented stuff, came back to him and say, hey, this is what I did and so on. And then, went to the next request, and then that sort of built up.
So if you're listening, you may be nodding your head saying, yeah, I guess if I wrote Jack and Jeremy a reply with what I tested out based on their advice and sent stats, I would get a reply. But there's probably something else going on in your body that's like, oh man, what work that would be in order to draft this email. So I want to just lay out that, there's a spectrum here, and it depends how much you're willing to work to get this reply.
That's right.
And I just think I think if we could boil this episode down into 20-second snippet, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but it would be, the trend is you're going to have to work for these replies in order to win at cold email. You're going to have to do more than you did in 2018, 2019. Is that what we're saying?
I would say to some extent, because I think in order to get, a reply from very high level type of person, we all seen those blogs like, hey, how this, cold email enabled me to get my next job, or connect with that, high level person. And they all share that stuff about finding something or making some sort of effort, finding something to connect and then bridge the gap between your reader and yourself. And then you get the reply. And of course, those things are super hard to automate. And that's exactly why you're getting the reply.
Right.
Because as soon as this thing becomes easy to automate, you're not going to get that high margin again that I was talking about. New things, high margin. And then as the things get propagated, lower margin.
So maybe it's going to be like figuring out what ways you can just connect with somebody and leave the sales conversation for 3 months from now, after they've had a chance to, I don't know, see some of your LinkedIn updates, hear what you have to say on Twitter. Maybe, like, I'm saying all this, but I know right now that my clients are not having to do all these things, and they're very happy. And I think it's a trend. It's where cold email is going. And just in general, you've got to sweeten the deal, I think, more than you used to. I think that's what's separating the winners. Do you have anything on that, Jeremy?
Well, the way I see that is, a listener is probably saying to himself or herself, oh, that's all good, but, I still want to contact 20 people, every day, or 40 people. I think there's still the volume coming up. It's like, how am I going to, scale that? And I think what Jack and I are talking is a sure way of connecting with someone.
Well said.
So we're like talking like the 90% or 80% plus reply rate here, right there. And that's reachable, guys. If you put the efforts into it, you're going to have it. It's a sure way.
Yeah.
But that could well be your strategy to reach out to VIP people. So those people who will then open the door to hundreds of other potential clients and things like that.
Here's where this all fits in, where if you have one campaign that's very low volume, but you're getting an 80% reply rate with these VIPs, that when you get them on the phone or you get a reply, it's a very big deal. You've also maybe got a mid-range campaign that's going out that's got some well thought out list building, some personalization, but maybe no multi-channel approaches. Maybe it's just a very damn good cold email. And then maybe you have a third campaign that's a shorter email that's being sent to, let's say, 20 prospects a day that are just meant to get them on a white paper of yours. That's something that's very straightforward to do, but it's an opener for a campaign that you send out in a month from that day when you get the reply. Maybe they can work together to make sure that inbox has healthy engagement.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I'm thinking, you got multiple ways of going. Maybe upfront work is super high, and maybe your multi-part campaign makes the rest actually pretty easy. So maybe effectively this is super high, most of the time doing research to get the first person to reply, then you get them on your white paper, and then you ask them for recommendation or for introducing you to other people. And maybe that's your gate kind of thing into...
gateway drug.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Into, getting more people. So you have like upfront high costs. And then, as time goes, you still get more leads, but then the cost of effort of each lead is actually reduced because you built, the trust upfront with some people who will then get you access to other people. Because, at the end of the day, word of mouth is what works great, in terms of referral. It's like, hey, if someone comes to me and say, hey, Jack recommending me you, then obviously I'm going to give him more attention because Jack is precious to me. And therefore, that value is sort of transferred to whoever is actually referencing Jack as someone,
Right.
he sent me, so whatever.
And it's interesting because this conversation, I think, could be put on a marketing podcast and it could still work. This is probably one of the first episodes that sounds like it's written for a marketer as opposed to a salesperson, or maybe
interesting,
both in this case, just because, look, I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with nurturing prospects with the mentality of a helpful marketer. I don't know. I see that as a nice evolution to this.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view.
But okay, so in terms of like action steps, I think just seeing engagement playing a key role, understanding that there's many ways to open a conversation and it doesn't have to be involved with the sales process immediately. And probably I would venture to say that the SDR with the longer term outlook, the founder who is willing to nurture a prospect for 3 months, 6 months, a year to win that sale.
For the $29 a month.
Yeah, maybe not that, but you know where you're playing. But the idea is this is potentially, the next phase here of cold email. And since you're listening, you're up on it. But
here's my proposal for your listeners. Try to get 2, let's call it high velocity campaigns versus low velocity campaigns. So what we were talking about, like super high touch, that's what I call a low velocity type of campaign. Maybe we'll have multiple part campaigns and things like that. Versus you're probably using a more high velocity type of campaign where, it's just like the typical, first email trying to engage, then sort of follow-ups and so on. We're a big fan here on the show of the 80-20 rule. Maybe, spend those 20% into trying to build up that sort of like low velocity campaign and give it like a couple of months and then see if that one actually outperformed the other one, because it could be.
I think that's great advice. And even if you wanted, I like quicker results than a couple of months. I'll give my take on that. It's just pick 2 prospects that you would be ecstatic to work with and spend 15 minutes writing them an email that sort of freaks them out in a good way. And see if that practice doesn't end up being a habit for your sales process. Because if you're getting a 50% reply rate, you may slowly start to move over to these low velocity campaigns, like Jeremy just said. Sometimes it only takes a couple replies to become a believer.
Yeah, also I have to say that usually when I do that, the emails I actually write spend like 1 to 2 hours. And the funny thing is like they end up like being not very big, like 5, 6, 7 lines maybe, but still. I think it takes time to refine good email.
Okay. Find a sweet spot, but the idea is to get out and test if you haven't tried some of this before.
All right. So I think we slacked enough and need to go back to work at some point, right?
That's exactly right. And I'll leave you with an editing quote. It says, "I wrote you a long letter and I would have made it shorter, but I didn't have the time." Okay.
Jack, great cast.
Great cast. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher, or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
So they can send awesome emails.
And make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.